In today's video, we have the latest NHL trade talk around the Vancouver Canucks. Is a major move imminent? Will we be seeing something soon? Could it be a trade? Will somebody be getting fired? Will somebody new be coming to the organization? We also have word around the New York Islanders. Could the Minnesota Wild trade young star Kevin Fiala? We also have word on a returning Evander Kane. Is that happening with the San Jose Sharks? And we have a few other news, including a fine and injury updates as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. A few other quick tidbits here before we jump into the trade section of the video. First up, Wild forward Ryan Hartman has been fined $4,250, which unfortunately, is the maximum allowed under the CBA for this type of offense, but he's been fined for slew footings. Again, we've been seeing a lot of these in the NHL lately. We've seen a few other players be fined as well. Nothing for PK Subban, who's had 4 separate incidents, though, in the past 4 to 6 weeks. He hasn't had anything in the last few games here, but still something that's been occurring at an unusually high rate here, and another fine for that. We got word that Kevin Hayes has had I guess they're calling it like a re-injury, and he's going to be out listed week to week. We know he had surgery leading into the season, just recently came back. So he's going to be out again. Hopefully it's not too long for Philadelphia. Also got word on the return of Carey Price in Montreal. As we know, he's returned from the player assistance program. He's been with the team now for, I'm not sure exactly how many days, but it's been a little while. But he's not close to returning to NHL game action. He hasn't skated, I believe, in close to a week. He will be skating again here soon. He's still getting a lot of conditioning work in. He's still getting some treatment for his knee that was, injury he dealt with in the offseason. So it's going to be a little while. They haven't really given a definitive timetable for when Carey Price is going to get into NHL game action. But I'm going to say, based on this, I think it's fair to say it's going to be at least another week or two. Good news over in the goaltending department. They are seeming reasonably confident that Jake Allen will be cleared and hopefully will be able to play on Wednesday. Of course, he had a collision in the game against Detroit and was suffering from concussion symptoms. So that appears to be on the mend here. And I think they're going to have to put him through his concussion testing here to make sure he's able to be cleared. But they're optimistic that could happen this week, which would be good news to get some more experienced goaltending between the pipes. Of course, the Canadians are having a really rough start to the season. We talked a lot about yesterday about the fact of a lot of different moves they might be making if they don't get things turned around. But I do expect something to happen here soon, because we really need to get a good, clear indication on who's really going to be leading this team into the future. General Manager Marc Bergevin remains without a contract beyond the current season, and with things not going all that well, and certainly looks like they're going to be in a draft lottery possibility, at least possibly out of the playoffs, you would think they'd want somebody managing at the helm who's going to be with the team longer term to get the right decisions made and everything. So I would imagine we shouldn't wait too long to get clarity on that, but there really hasn't been any updates on his future with the club here as well. Now, of course, as we mentioned, we have a variety of NHL trade talk today, as well as a returning Evander Kane. Now, we don't know for sure that he's going to be returning to the San Jose Sharks, but he is eligible to return at the end of the month, so we're not that far away. I did see one report that I believe he was spotted at a Sharks practice facility. There's a lot of talk. I'm wondering, will he come back? Is he coming back? Like, what's going on? Now, Kevin Kurz of The Athletic has indicated here as well that the vibe around the room and around the team without Kane seems to be much better. Many players on the Sharks roster, we know, including the most leadership group, had made it clear they weren't really happy or thrilled about the possibility of him coming back. I mean, he was viewed upon as being a really good player on the ice, but off the ice, I don't think it's something they really viewed him as being a good teammate. He broke several team rules, numerous occasions that we had heard of, and this didn't really seem like he was being a good, mature teammate. He had a lot of off-ice dramas, we know, that we've talked about at great length and extent here on the channel. Now, the good news, I guess, for him is that all of that stuff has kind of been dealt with. He's still dealing with a very somewhat public here off-ice, divorce and, court stuff, but at least from the NHL's perspective, they've investigated all allegations. He's been cleared. He's facing the suspension right now, which was for providing, a a fraudulent COVID record for his vaccine, is what I guess was being described before, that the record that was provided wasn't legit. So once the suspension is over, at this point, even though he still has some off-ice drama kind of going on, being, settled in the courts, the NHL, from their perspective, is he's able to play. So will they let him play, or will they try to move on? Because the San Jose Sharks had a pretty decent start to their season. Things have somewhat kind of cooled and normalized, I guess we could say. Since that hot start, the first 4 or 5 games, things were looking like maybe this might be a different team, but they've really cooled off greatly since then. So you'd have to think, though, regardless of winning and losing, if the team is doing better, the team is happier, and they have a better chance to keep around some other players that maybe don't want out now if he's not around, that you'd have to think they might try to trade that contract. But the only problem is what team is going to take on that drama. They'd have to be given an awful lot of extra incentive, and I just don't know that the Sharks can really afford to do that. We had heard before from Chris Johnson and numerous other NHL insiders and reporters that they were not going to be able to terminate the contract and get out of it like we saw the LA Kings do a number of years back with, like, Mike Richards, for example. Different set of circumstances, but still a case where they really wanted out of the contract because of off-ice stuff going on, and they were able to do that. Now, of course, things did get disputed, and they had to reach a settlement afterwards. So obviously precedent's kind of been set there, and Kane's not going to likely have that happen to him. So what will happen, we don't know. All we know is he's eligible to return at the end of the month, but Kerr seems confident at this point that the Sharks likely don't want him back. But what can they do? Will they pay him to stay home, or will they continue to look for a trade? We should have more clarity on that soon. Now, of course, as well, I want to talk about the Islanders. The Islanders are another underperforming, struggling team this year. Elliot Friedman's reporting that he believes that they are looking for a young, dynamic, mobile defenseman, ideally with term. Now, we've talked about this before. The Islanders really have 2 clear-cut holes in their team. They need ideally a mobile defenseman, preferably a left shot defenseman, and they could also use another scorer. They've been really looking for that extra piece to add up front for the last couple of years. They've been having really, really good regular season results, getting into the playoffs, going deep in the playoffs. They just seem to be not having quite enough of that offensive punch to get over the hump and really be that more solid cup contender. So, those are the 2 things we were expecting this offseason. Lou Lamoriello did do a really good job at moving out a lot of dead weight, some bad contracts, freeing up space, but the extra pieces you were hoping to see him add with that just has not materialized. I mean, some of the guys he's added haven't overly worked out. Kyle Palmieri was re-signed. Overall, he hasn't scored much. Chara was signed as a free agent, and even though he's had a great career, you can tell that age is certainly starting to creep up on him. Their blue line's just not as dynamic as it needs to be back there between he and Green. They're playing too much. Like they have some issues back there. And we had mentioned a player which was talked about in the rumor mill by Friedman and others, is Samuel Girard being a potential target. The only issue with that now, of course, is that might be a deal that the Avalanche want to hold off on for the time being, given the fact that young defenseman Bowen Byram is injured again and could be out for a little while here. So they're definitely going to want to get more clarity on that situation before they really proceed there. Byram did have a concussion to end last season, so they certainly want to be careful with his health and obviously make sure that he's good longer term. I think it's probably fair to say the Islanders might be regretting trading Devon Toews to the Avalanche previously. I know they kind of had to make some moves the year before for cap purposes, but Toews has turned out to be a phenomenal defenseman for the Avalanche, and really they should have probably tried to move on from Nick Leddy a year sooner instead of moving to younger, more dynamic Devon Toews. I mean, to me, I guess in retrospect, but it's tough and easy to do looking back with the hindsight here, that it was certainly not the right move. But I think Devon Toews on the blue line will look pretty good now. And of course, now his teammate Samuel Girard might be a target of the Islanders, but I think it's going to be a while before we see a deal done here. But the Islanders have opened their new building. They come off a season-long 13-game road trip. They still have dropped the first 2 home games. They need to get things turned around and quick if they're going to have any hope of salvaging this season. If this goes on even another week or 2 without a significant streak being worked up in the win column, they're going to have it almost impossible task getting themselves into the playoffs, and this is going to be a lost season for a group of players that had certainly pretty high expectations. So we'll see where this goes, but I would expect Lou to be doing something relatively drastic very quickly, but you never know. He might not take that approach, and this might not work out for the Islanders this year. We'll have to wait and see, but according to Friedman, that's what he feels they're working on. When it comes to the Minnesota Wild, there is some that feel that a possible trade might happen with Kevin Fiala. Now, I said this myself last offseason when they were having a really hard time coming to a new contract. He's a restricted free agent. He's going to be again. They signed a 1-year deal. All they did is they took all those issues they were having on coming to terms on a new deal, and they just punted it down the road to deal with it later. And at this point, he's had a bit of a slump at times. I mean, I don't think he's going to be traded for that, which Elliotte Friedman goes on to say that they're not going to trade him because he was having a slump. They're going to trade him if they feel like they can make the team better. But Merrick made a good point on the podcast, indicating that that's part of the reason why Nashville traded him in the first place to Minnesota, is that he's a very young, extremely confident forward, almost confident to the point that it rubs people the wrong way, kind of comes off to some as being a little on the cocky side, and that certainly has not been the most endearing with some in different organizations. So that might be part of the issue here, why these rumors are surfacing. It might be more of the attitude part of it more than anything else, but he's a really solid hockey player. There's no doubt about it. A lot of teams would have interest to acquire him, especially as he's getting older and could hopefully mature, if that is the issue. I can't say for certain it is, but at the end of the day here, the Minnesota Wild had a really hard time with this contract. They were miles apart, and as I said before, between he and Kaprizov, if they didn't lower their demands and come to more realistic contracts, I've seen a possibility of at least one of them getting traded down. And I think that Fiala is likely going to be that guy, considering Kaprizov's contract turned out to be much longer than Fiala's. I don't really think it's something that they are actively looking to do. But at the end of the day here, this might not even be a deal we see this season. It might get bumped to more like the offseason, depending on how this goes, though. If the Wild end up, in a situation where the rest of the season's not looking as good, or if things really get worse with whatever it is that's causing these rumors to surface in the first place, maybe we'll see something. But he'd get him a great return. There's no doubt. They could certainly address multiple areas of the team. But we have to wonder if a lot of it might be off-ice attitude and things like that might have been spurring this. And with the contract, if it doesn't happen soon, I can see it being a real solid possibility for the offseason. And lastly, I want to talk about Vancouver. Now, the situation there continues. Obviously, at this point, they had another loss to the Blackhawks. It was 1-0. You could certainly say they played better. The effort was better. But you know what? At this point, a lot of people are saying it doesn't even matter anymore with the Vancouver Canucks. We've had a lot of talk about effort and execution and what's going on with their star players, but it doesn't even matter now because this is a results-oriented league and they're not getting it. So even if the effort's better but they're still not winning, something still needs to happen. There's reports from Thomas Drance of The Athletic. I've seen Rick Dollywall and others, even Elliotte Friedman, talk about the Canucks here in the past day, talking about the fact that they feel something big is imminent. They just can't necessarily pinpoint exactly what it is. They're hearing a variety of reports from a variety of sources saying anything as far as that the room seems to be divided. We've seen reports of a big trade coming. Is somebody significant going to get fired? Is it Jim Benning? I don't think it is right now. I think he's got the support of Aquilini, at least for the time being. But there is also reports that instead of doing something big like that, they may end up hiring a new president of hockey operations, bring in somebody else to kind of be the evaluator, if you will, to be above Jim Benning, and they can kind of punt the problems down the road a little bit, have him take some time, evaluate things, and make more deals if things don't get turned around closer to the trade deadline and then into the offseason and get ready for next year. But we'll see what happens. I mean, could we see a guy like a Jim Rutherford or a very experienced hockey man come in to be the president to kind of hopefully right the ship there? It's possible. But as I've said before, Friedman even did mention a possibility of a significant trade to shake things up. And as I said, they're going to have to do something with value if they do that. And I have to think a guy like Brock Besser would be near the list because, out of all the players, if you look at the fact he needs a new contract soon and where things are at, he would get them good value. There'd be a lot of teams all over that. And I'm not suggesting that they actively want to move Boeser, but they got to do something because what they have now is just not working. I don't see them wanting to trade Pettersson or Hughes, but at this point, you got to even question what the heck is going on with Elias Pettersson. He is nowhere near what he was a few years ago, and he's still a young man, just signed a new contract. A lot of it doesn't seem to make sense, but we'll have to see what happens. But many of the Vancouver media feel something big is about to happen. So let me know what you think. Is it more likely going to be like a Benning or Green getting fired? Is it going to be a new president coming in to hopefully take over? Are we going to see a significant trade? And could it be a guy like Boeser or Horvat or somebody significant to really shake this up and get a new, some new blood here in the mix to get this going in the right direction? Let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.